Hi guys, this is Taylor and I'm here today with my November wrap-up. I have had one of those semesters where absolutely everything seems to be due all at the same time, and that time happened to be the last 2 weeks. So I apologize for the lack of videos. I have one more essay to write, one final to take, and then I'll be done for about 2 months. And I have a lot of videos that I want to try and put out in that time, so in the meantime I hope that you enjoyed this wrap up. I think after October, when I basically just read one big book for the entire month, my brain wanted to complete a bunch of smaller books. So that's basically what happened. I read 6 books and most of them were on the smaller side. They also completely run the gamut in terms of their content and what kind of books they are. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into it. So the first book I read in November was Sailor Moon and Post-Bubble Japan by John le Cure. I picked this up obviously because I love Sailor Moon, but also because in the past I have had luck with self-published nonfiction about Sailor Moon, and this had pretty good reviews on Amazon, so I figured I'd give it a shot. However, this was not good. First of all, it was only 50% about Sailor Moon, and the other half was about an anime that I hadn't seen before. And I would have understood if he had been talking about this other anime in order to set the stage for his thesis about Sailor Moon, but that didn't really seem to be the case, and that kind of leads into my main complaint about this whole thing. Even though the writing was relatively academic, it didn't seem to be making any points about anything. I really got the sense that if you had just asked me to talk about Sailor Moon for an hour without any prior notice, the transcript would be something like this. It was just very rambling. It didn't circle back or finish any thoughts, really. Basically, I didn't like this. I gave it 2 stars. If you are interested in reading nonfiction on Sailor Moon, I would recommend Warriors of Legend, Reflections of Japan and Sailor Moon. This one is really well done. The next book I finished in November was Fox 8 by George Saunders. This came out in November. It is a single previously published short story that has been published on its own with illustrations. I honestly read this in a single sitting while I unpacked it from the box at work. I want to say it's about 60 pages or so. This is about a fox who has learned English and is telling his story to us humans. It's a story about how humans building into the habitats of animals really disrupts their lives. It's funny and cute and sad all at the same time. The voice is very George Saunders, so if you like his other stuff, I don't see any reason that you wouldn't like this. Yeah, there's nothing to really not like about this. It's really charming and it has an important message. I gave it 4 stars. The next thing I read in November I'm going to talk about very briefly, but the second volume of the Eternal editions of the Sailor Moon manga came out this month. I read it. It was amazing. I love these editions so much. I made a video talking mostly about the benefits of reading these editions as opposed to the standard editions. Definitely check that out if you're interested in knowing what makes these editions so special. I gave this 5 stars. The next book I read in November, and this is where it starts to get kind of weird. I read To Kill a Mockingbird for the first time. I just did. So this won the Great American Read poll in November, so it was officially ranked as America's favorite book. So I figured that it was about time for me to finally read it, and it was on my 2018 TBR anyway, so I read To Kill a Mockingbird for the first time, and I liked it. Probably the #1 thing that surprised me and stuck with me is actually how funny the voice is. Just going into this knowing really minimal information about some of its darker themes, I was really pleasantly surprised at Scout's voice. I thought that it was a nice coming-of-age story, and I think that it is really effective to tackle those darker themes through the lens of a child. I thought this was a solid novel. I will say for me personally, I didn't really get what makes this America's absolute favorite book. Even in person, if you ask 10 people what their favorite book is, one of them is going to say To Kill a Mockingbird. So I didn't really get what would make this a favorite novel, but that's okay. Like I said, I thought this was solid. I gave it 3 stars, and I'm genuinely glad to have read To Kill a Mockingbird at this point. I feel like I'm finally qualified to be here on BookTube. The second to last book I finished in November was Universal Harvester by John Darnell. I will tell you the plot of this book and then I'll tell you why it's a little bit deceiving. So this is set in the 90s in Iowa, and our main character works in a video rental place, and tapes keep coming back with really weird, unsettling movies recorded over them, and we slowly find out what is going on in this small town. I say it's a little bit deceptive because the way the plot sounds, it sounds like it's going to lend itself a little bit more to a mystery, when in reality the pacing is quite slow and literary. I have read his other novel, Wolf and White Van, so I did expect this to some degree, but I did find that the pacing really hit a wall about a third of the way in. This book does some really cool things, like playing with reality and timelines, and the narrator is just a big question mark, and the lead-in is really effective, but ultimately this didn't end up being anything really satisfying, and I'm not someone who needs everything to be tied up at the end at all, but the parts just didn't add up to anything particularly memorable for me, even though I really liked aspects of this novel. I think I gave this 3 stars, but honestly 5-star cover. And lastly, in November, we're getting into weird territory again because I decided to read Wuthering Heights for the first time. I was really trying to tackle my 2018 TBR, and I decided to pick up Wuthering Heights for the first time, and I really did not care for it. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, but it's Wuthering Heights, so none of them are particularly original. I have 2 main complaints though, okay? The first one is that I didn't get nearly enough backstory for these characters' actions to make sense. The whole jealousy thing, which is to say the entire point of the book, I just didn't understand because I didn't know why these characters were in love in the first place. And the second thing was, of course, the characters themselves. I know a lot of people like to kind of revel in the horribleness of these characters, and I myself do not need to like my characters either. But everyone in this book felt more like a caricature than anything else. Honestly, I didn't really find anybody interesting because everyone seemed to have 1 or maybe 2 character traits at most. I just didn't get this one. I felt like it was pretty ridiculous, but not even really the type of ridiculousness I can really get on board with. I think in the end I gave this 2 stars. And on that note, now that I've made everybody mad, that was my November. It was really all over the place, and that completely makes sense based on the month that I've had. But feel free to let me know how your November went, and I hope to have a bunch of other content coming your way. So in the meantime, I hope that you're having a great day, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!